about it in more economic terms. Another literary figure, one of Baldwin's favorites, it was a love-hate relationship, was with William Faulkner, probably the greatest American thinker on race in the 20th century, who happened to be a white man from Oxford, Mississippi, and grew up in a deeply racist place. He probably witnessed a lynching when he was a young boy, and thought about and wrote about race relations in the Deep South in his greatest work. And in the 50s, after he had won the Nobel Prize and everybody was asking him, what about Mississippi, right, during the early years of the Civil Rights Movement? It's the last thing he wanted to talk about. But his answer was this: racism exists because it's profitable. It's not really about my antagonism, right? Looking at a Bubba Sheriff or some monstrous caricature of a racist coming out of Alabama or Mississippi in the Civil Rights Movement can be counterproductive in this sense, because you really need to think systemically about the incentives that we have, all of us, to participate in processes that actually depend on racist outcomes. It doesn't mean that you're individually a racist, but if you're participating in a long-term historical process, especially an economic one, whose results lead to racist outcomes. That is a kind of complicity that's much harder to deal with at any level. So what it means is that, you know, you can look at, say, the prison system, which is dealt with here a little bit towards the end of the film, and think about incarceration and what this means economically. And then think about who really is benefiting from this overall policy. It's not simply because a lot of white people are scared of black people that this happens, although that plays a role. But there are fundamental economic incentives and beneficiaries that perpetuate that process. So I think I would say this is kind of the macro and the micro somehow working together, that you really have to put both of these things in play and think about the way that your own actions are powerful, the way that you can actually make a difference in your own life and the people around you. And there is no telling how those investments might pay off in the long run, because good karma can take 50 years to finally pay off, right? And then at the same time, trying to do what you can to educate yourself and finally invest, and I mean that financially, economically, with your time, with your talent, with your resources, in processes that begin to undo some of the negative long-term effects of this history, which is very deep, right? And then actually invest in better, more sustainable long-term, right? So just you personally should go fix everything for us. It would be cool at that point. Back in the corner. One more from the back. We got a few up here too. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of the question. You had asked what Baldwin contributed to the conversation regarding civil rights that was a bit different from Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, that kind of idea. I think one of the things that really moved me for his perspective is the idea that he really does a good job of communicating the soul matter of it, right? It's not just an economic thing, it's not a social thing, it's not a historical thing. Baldwin really comes at it from an angle of this is a soul issue. That if you have a soul, dehumanizing someone because of their race also dehumanizes you, right? And that is something that, for me, really changed the conversation, because even what you're talking about regarding systemic expressions of racism and prejudice, and how systems feed on racial prejudice, how systems feed and live and thrive and grow off of the ideas of blackness and whiteness. It all stems from this idea that I and myself can look at someone else and see them as something other than human, or other than myself, or other than the fundamental thing that connects us all, which is, you know, us being humans. And I don't know, I think that Baldwin does a great job. I'm like in a Baldwin era right now. Like, I'm reading everything about him. Just because he does, I think he offers that perspective that really kind of empowers you, right? To not just take. I feel like if you view, it's very easy to see the effects of racism and prejudice in the systems that we live in today, and it can make it feel very helpless. Like how you look at the penitentiary system, you even look at the educational system where, we don't have courses that talk about many African American or Native American or Latino or Asian American, activists or political figures or whatever the case may be in the educational system. Like all these different systemic things can make it feel very hopeless. But I think what Baldwin offered me personally is an empowerment. Or I could put it like this. I had a conversation with a friend. He's a white guy, and he basically, this summer, he was texting me back and forth about the riots in Charlottesville. Was asking me just like, what, from your perspective as an African American male, what can I do as a white male to contribute to the conversation and the reality of, racism in America? And that was a very daunting conversation to walk into. But I think the biggest thing, it's sobering, but I think it's empowering, is that you have to steward your own conviction. You have to steward your own convictions regarding what you think about other people. Black people can't give that to white people. You know what I'm saying? We can't, there's only so much that black people can do or the systems can do to help other people realize this is wrong. At some point, which this is a sobering matter of it, you've got to take responsibility of your own perspective, your own narrative, and really take a look at it in terms of how does this affect the world around me, even in my private life, right? But it's empowering because systems don't determine that for you. A system can't tell you what to feel in your own soul or the decisions that you make. And I think understanding how powerful those decisions that come from the inside out are, that can begin to shift the systems we live in. Really understanding this idea that if I were to reevaluate how, or even just evaluate, period, the state of my soul and how that affects me viewing other people, I think that would really create a macro, a long-term solution than systems could ever do, than policies could ever do. And I think Baldwin's I Am Not Your Negro really does a good job of like holding people accountable to that, and of really shoving that in people's faces of like, you can, like he said it, like, the state of America is as bright or as dim as the state of what you do with the Negro in America, So that, I hope that makes sense.
That's great. I'm being waved at over here. Do we have one more question?
Well, it's a question and a comment, and I'll make it a lot shorter than the others. My father actually knew Mark, goodness, I think about it, in Memphis. And my father was shot 1 year later. But I want to ask, before you ladies leave, how many activists are in the room or active in your local community? If you could raise your hand. I really want to implore you to become more active. And if you're not active, to consider, whatever your political affiliation is, there's the Women's March on the 20th. The Martin Luther King Parade's coming up on Monday. And I hear a lot of different groups will be there to talk with. So I just really want to encourage you to get involved in your local community, whatever you're passionate about. And I hope some of you will consider doing that after watching this lovely documentary. And I want to say that race is a social construct. The white race did not even exist until the 17th century in the Virginia Commonwealth, where they legally defined the white race, mulatto race, and Negro race. And it was about money, as you referred to earlier. I get really angry when I think about the race issue, because it was created in Virginia. So, and my family's from there. Thank you. I'm concluded. Thank you.
Yes, very helpful. I appreciate appreciate that, and I would second that call for greater public action.
Yes.
This is very important. It can take many, many forms. This is something that we all need to think about. It's not simply sit-ins and marches and sort of thing, but it really is everyday practice. We have a few more hands up. I'd love to stay and talk. I'll be around for a while because my wife is taking care of our kids tonight. Your families are probably taking care of you too, so maybe we can just have a little more of a conversation. Informal.